I've been making this cranberry and mushroom brisket for years. It has always been a holiday favorite. But even if you're not a fan of the cranberry and the mushroom and the flavors that I'm putting in this, you can use the same technique and cooking times and temperatures to make a barbecued brisket or a simple salt and pepper brisket. So you can turn this into any kind of pressure cooked brisket that you like. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today's recipe is for cranberry mushroom brisket. Now this is a recipe that has been adapted from A Taste of Home. So I've changed the ingredients around a little bit, and of course I switched it around to make it in the Ninja Foodi pressure cooker. But it's been one of those meals that I used to make for the residents of my assisted living, and it is amazing. So even if you're not sure about this combination of ingredients, I really urge you to give it a try. It makes just a gorgeous presentation, and you're gonna find out how beautiful it is. So I'm using the 6.5 quart Ninja Foodi, but you could use any Instant Pot, any size Ninja Foodi. Not sure how well it would work in the 5 quart though, because we do need to elevate the brisket above the liquid. So we might need to configure that a little bit to make it work. But definitely in the 6.5 quart, the 8 quart, or any Instant Pot that's 6.5 or 8 quarts. All right, so this is pretty much dump it in and set it on pressure. So this is a really super easy recipe. It takes a while because you need to pressure cook the brisket a while, but it is totally hands off until after the brisket is finished. So we're gonna go ahead and open up the lid here. I'm gonna start by adding the liquid, which is 1 cup of beef stock, 1/4 cup of red wine vinegar, or you could use regular red wine, that would be fine too. 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar. We're gonna put in half of the cranberries. These are frozen cranberries, but they can be fresh. I mean, these were fresh, I just threw them in the freezer, but they can be frozen or thawed. Either way is fine. And I'm gonna use about half. So this was well over 2 cups, probably 3 cups. So I'm just gonna estimate. That looks good. And I put that in now because we want some of the cranberries to really cook down, flavor our gravy, because we're gonna make some gravy afterwards. And then I'm gonna reserve the rest of them for at the very end, so you have these beautiful cranberries in your gravy. Then I'm gonna do the same thing with the onions. So I'm gonna put some onions down in the liquid here. So I put half down in the pot. Doesn't matter if you break them up or leave them whole, makes no difference. And then I'm gonna put in, this is 4 cups, 16 ounces of sliced portobello mushrooms. Now you can use the white button mushrooms, that's perfectly fine, but I just happen to really like the portobello. Then I just give this a move around here. Looks good. All right, I'm gonna put in some of the garlic. This is 1 bulb. It was probably about 10 cloves of garlic that I just smashed and peeled, and they're kind of on the big side. So I put a couple, like maybe half probably, down in the mixture, and the other half I put with the brisket. You know, just set it on top. All right, now we've got to get our rack in here, and so sometimes you need to be a little bit, you know, you need to like mash it down a little bit so that it sits on the bottom so that our pressure lid can go on, because we do have a full pot. Now keep in mind that we're not going to air crisp right now. So even if your rack is a little bit elevated, as long as your lid goes on, you're perfectly fine. I have tested this recipe with 8 ounces of mushrooms, and I decided to increase it to a full pound of mushrooms because I just didn't think there was enough mushrooms in the gravy at the end. But if you use 8 ounces of mushrooms, the rack does fit and touch the bottom. All right, so now we need to get our brisket done. And I'm using a very simple rub, salt, pepper, and crushed rosemary. So the salt is 1.5 teaspoons of fine grind sea salt. Remember, if you're using table salt, you need to decrease that amount significantly because it's going to oversalt your food if you use 1.5. So I would probably cut that in half, use 3/4 teaspoon of table salt, and then you can always add salt to the gravy at the end. I have 1 teaspoon of black pepper and half of a teaspoon of crushed rosemary leaves. Now these are dry. I like to use dry rubs on meat most of the time, but if you only had fresh rosemary, you could certainly use that. And I would probably use about a teaspoon of fresh rosemary leaves that were finely chopped. So I'm just going to mix this up here, and we're going to apply it to all sides of our meat. Now let me talk about the brisket before I do that. So this is a 3-pound brisket. I actually got a very large one and was able to cut it into 3 and 4 pound sections. So I've tested the recipe with 3 and 4 pound briskets and they work just fine. One thing I was a little disappointed in myself about is I tested the 2 pieces of brisket that had the best looking fat caps on them. And this one, when I got it out of the freezer, it's a little bare. It's still gonna work. But what I like for this recipe is a nice fat cap all over the top of the brisket, because when we go to air crisp at the end, that part gets absolutely, delicious. But, we're gonna make do here. So I'm gonna sprinkle this on and rub it in to the brisket on all sides. And I've had my brisket out of the refrigerator for just about 30 minutes or so. I do recommend getting it out a little bit sooner. Oops, I'm spilling some of my rub. A little bit before you cook it so it has a chance to kind of warm up a little bit. That's more important. I don't know why I'm being so clumsy with this. I'm just gonna do it this way. That allows it to cook more evenly, especially if you're using like a grill or a smoker or anything like that. In the pressure cooker, it's not as big of a deal. All right, that looks good. Now I've been trying to decide which way. It doesn't really matter for pressure cooking, but anyway, when you have the fat cap, I usually put the fat cap up, okay? Now, the next thing, and I don't have to worry about washing my hands because this is all gonna be pressure cooked, so don't freak out, okay? I'm gonna line the rack with some of the sprigs of rosemary that I have and the rest of these onions. Now, the onions will fall down as they pressure cook, and that is perfectly fine because we want them all in our gravy anyway. But I like to just create this little bed just to hopefully give the brisket a little bit more flavor. So I'm gonna take probably about 2 things of rosemary. Mine are a little on the small side. Usually rosemary sprigs that you get are pretty long, but my rosemary bush is getting ready to hibernate for the winter. So they're kind of looking a little chintzy. But anyway, 2 to 4 sprigs of rosemary. If you don't like rosemary, skip it in the rub, skip it here. It's perfectly fine. All right, now we're gonna set this on top here. That looks good. And I'm just gonna throw in the rest of the garlic, and I just set them on top. Oops, I got a little piece of a peel here. I just set them on top so they're gonna pressure cook right on top. We're gonna dump them into the gravy afterwards. All right, now I'm gonna wash my hands so I can touch the lid and all that kind of stuff. And we're gonna get this under pressure, high pressure, for 60 minutes. Okay, that's all we have to do. Now I have the vent sealed in the back, and we will let this pressure cook for 60 minutes. It's gonna take probably about 10, 12, maybe even 15 minutes to come up to pressure. And then we do a full natural release. That takes anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, but I just let it go. And the best thing is, if you get tied up doing something else, like I know I'm going to get tied up doing something else, it doesn't matter if it even sits in there longer. You're not going to ruin anything. So don't worry about it. If you are, in the middle of something and the pressure pin drops down, you can let it sit on keep warm for another hour. It's going to be just fine. That's one of the things I love about these recipes that are a long pressure cook time. So just let it go and go do something else. Then when we get back and it's all done, we'll remove the meat and I'll take you through the rest of making the gravy and slicing that beef. All right, so it took about 17 minutes to build the pressure and start the countdown for the 60-minute pressure cook. And then it took 30 minutes, which every single time I've done it, it's taken just about 30 minutes for the natural release. So you can plan on that. And then you can just lift it up and it looks beautiful. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and pull the brisket out. Now again, I really am disappointed in myself that I didn't pick the best brisket to do the video on, because my other ones had beautiful fat caps on them and they crisped up beautifully. They were more uniform in shape, but you know what? It is what it is. It happens, right? All right, so now we're just gonna let that sit there and I'm gonna take the rack out. We're gonna go back, put the brisket back into air crisp because I do have some areas of fat that I definitely wanna crisp up because that's gonna give the best texture and flavor to your brisket. Now I'm just gonna pick this rack up, but you know what, before I do that, I wanna get any of these rosemary sprigs out. We don't want those in our gravies. If individual leaves, or yeah, I guess there are leaves, fall off, it's perfectly fine, but we don't want the big sprig. It would just be too overwhelming. This smells amazing, let me tell you, amazing. All right, now I'm just gonna drop all those onions back in there. We've got tons of liquid. There's almost 8 cups. So this makes a great amount of gravy. This is a 3-pound brisket. Remember, you can go up to a 4-pound brisket. That's no problem. All right, so now I'm just gonna ladle in with the cranberries, with the onions. I'm not gonna strain it. Don't need to worry about all that. I'm gonna ladle in all of this gravy here. I just can't even begin to tell you how good this smells. Oh my goodness. Now, if you wanted to make this ahead of time, go up until about this point, okay? Take all your gravy out. Put your gravy in the refrigerator. Well, it's not really gravy yet, it's juices. Put them in the refrigerator because then a fat cap is gonna form on the top and you can skim that off. Use some to make the roux, to make the gravy, and then you can discard the rest. You can also reheat the brisket using steam for maybe 10 minutes or so, and then air crisp just before you serve. Or you could even slice it now and then reheat with steam. Air crisp first, then let it sit, then slice it, then you can reheat with steam, make your gravy the next day. So this definitely can be done in 2 parts. I'm gonna get it done though all today, so I'm gonna show you how to do that if you just wanted to keep on going. All right, now that I'm down to just a little bit of the gravy, I'm gonna go ahead and put it back in there, finish that up, move this out of my way. Get the rack back in the low position, and I'm gonna pick the brisket back up. We're gonna air crisp on 400. I'm just gonna do a little turnaround of this just to see, and I think that's the good side to air crisp. That seems to have the one little piece of fat there. Oh my gosh. And then you can put your lid down and go over to the air crisp function. Take your heat up to 400 and hit start. Probably won't go 20 minutes. I'm gonna think about between 10 and 15 minutes and just keep an eye on it. Meanwhile, I'll clean this up and then I'm gonna show you how I get the fat off the top, because even now the fat is rising up to the top. And then we're gonna make our roux, make our gravy, and finish up our cranberry and mushroom brisket. All right, so what I do when I don't wanna wait for the fat to solidify in the refrigerator is use some sort of a scoop. I find that a round spoon does not work, or a round scoop like this, I forget what they're called, ladle, a round ladle does not work as well as something that has a flat edge. And then I just set it down right on the top and just sort of press down just a little bit, and I let that fat roll right on in there. And I'm getting mostly fat. You'll get some of the juices. That's perfectly fine. We have plenty of liquid here to work with. All right, and then I'm just gonna throw that right in there. You'll really see the fat coming to the top now. All right, that looks good. Now there's still more I could get off for sure, but I'm not gonna worry about that right now. We've got enough to get started anyway. Now you can see this already starting to separate. So the little bit of the fat is coming up to the top, and the rest of it just kind of sinks down. So I can either go in and scoop that off just to get the pure fat, but you know what? I don't worry about it. I put it all in, make the gravy just like it is. All right, so the brisket's been in there about 6 minutes, so let's go ahead and check on it. Oh, it's looking so good. Oh my goodness. Now, since mine is so uneven, I'm gonna move it around a little bit here. Oh my gosh. Wow. So I don't usually flip it at all because usually the fat cap's all on that one side, but mine's kind of weird the way that I cut it. So I'm gonna flip it over so it has a chance to render some of that fat that's on the back side too. So 5 more minutes and we should be good to go. Then I'll get the meat out, let it sit on a platter to rest, or you can let it sit on your cutting board to rest before cutting it. That's very important. And we'll make up our gravy. Alrighty. Oh my gosh, it looks so good. It looks so good. I hope I don't mess up the crust I just made by picking it up, but if I do, I do, and hopefully it doesn't fall apart on me. It's not. Good, good, good. All right, so it's absolutely gorgeous, except for the cut of meat that I chose. I mean, ordinarily it's just a perfect looking brisket, but this is the crust that you want to get on there. It's just, oh, so lovely. All right, so I'm gonna set this to the side and get the rack out. We don't need that anymore. Now there's some additional fat that has rendered off from the air crisp. We wanna leave that in. That's gonna help with our roux. Just gonna put this over here to the side for a second. Anything else that's in there is perfectly fine. It's just gonna add flavor. We probably have about a tablespoon, maybe a tablespoon and a half of the fat. And then we have a few more tablespoons of fat right here from the brisket. I'm gonna go ahead and dump that in with the juices, perfectly fine. We're gonna go to the sear saute on high, turn it on, and now I'm gonna sprinkle in the flour and whisk it up. Now I have a whisk that can go into the inner pot. That's the ceramic inner pot won't scratch. It's nylon. But if you don't, use some sort of a utensil that's nylon just to kind of stir it around for the flour to combine. I usually start off with about 1 to 2 tablespoons of flour. I have a 1/4 cup in here, but I'll probably use it all for sure. But you might even need some more, it just depends. Now I'm gonna whisk this up to get all the lumps out, and it will start to combine with the fat from the brisket, and it will start to thicken, and it thickens pretty quickly. You want to cook this for about 2 minutes, and I just making sure I get all these lumps out. Cook it for about 2 minutes before you start adding liquid to it. All right, I'm going to do that technique again with the fat off the top of the gravy to add a little bit more in so I can get the rest of that flour in there. All right, let me go ahead and sift in the rest of the flour. I didn't really have too many lumps, but you just don't want to have any lumps in your gravy, so sift in the flour. It makes it easier. I'm gonna go ahead and add in, so I sifted in maybe a tablespoon. I'm gonna go ahead and add in some more of this fat from the top here. Now there's a million ways to make gravy. This is just one way that I do with this dish because it's so simple. So I get a lot of comments about how other people make gravy, and they're all, fine. Make it however you want to make it. This is just how I do it in this recipe because I think it's easy. See, those are the little culprits there that cause a lot of the lumps in a gravy. Your flour just has little lumps in it naturally. When you sift it, you don't put those in. So it really helps quite a bit. All right, let's get this in. And now we're gonna cook it. Now that all the flour's in, I'm gonna still saute it for just about a minute and then start to add in the juices. And then we're gonna get all the good stuff from the gravy in. And you don't have, you can dump it all in, but I like to go bit by bit, like cup by cup, so it's the exact consistency that I want for my gravy. So after I add this in and cook this for 2 minutes, I'm gonna scoop in some of the cranberries and mushrooms and all that stuff that we want in our gravy. And then I will add the remaining liquid until I get the right thickness. All right, that looks good. Okay, so let's go ahead. Now you can use something that strains this out. I don't worry about it. I just take a nice big scoop out and put it in. I'm gonna do that until I get a lot of the solids out. I got a piece of rosemary stem in there. We'll grab that out. We can turn this down now. I'm going to turn this down to low. All right, that looks good for right now. I have maybe 2.5 cups of the liquid left. I can certainly add that in if I want to, or I can leave it out, it's fine. This looks like a good consistency though. So I'm just gonna let this go and cook on low for a few minutes while I cut up my brisket. First, let's add in the cranberries. And this is why I wait to add half of them to the last minute, because of that beautiful red color. So the cooked cranberries don't have that gorgeous color. They look dull and they're just not that festive. So that's why I add the cranberries in right now. All right, perfect. Let me clean this up, get the meat back up. We're gonna carve it up, put it on the platter, pour the gravy over top, and then I'm gonna give it a taste. All right, so while our gravy continues to simmer there on low, I'm gonna go ahead and carve up the brisket. Now, if I'm serving this for like a dinner party, I like to actually slice it all. Just makes it really easy. But if you think there's gonna be leftovers, only slice the number of slices you think you're gonna use, because it is a lot easier. Well, I mean, it's easy to reheat sliced or unsliced, but you're gonna have a better outcome if you keep the brisket in one large chunk. It's not gonna dry out as much when you go to reheat it. All right, so I'm just gonna put this fork in and go right on down. Now, when you carve a brisket, you are gonna have some fat, okay? That is normal. That is how briskets work. So if you don't like fat, pick a different cut of meat. So like right here in this piece here, there's a little fat cap, a little bit of meat, and then another little bit of fat. That is completely normal for all briskets. This looks amazing. Although I'm going in the wrong direction, to be honest with you. I really made a big mistake when I cut this brisket roast for this video. So I'm very upset with myself, but that is completely my fault. See, grain is going this way. Now it's not going to matter so much because we pressure cook, so it's going to be pretty tender anyway, but let me just show you the difference. So if I cut the slices from this end, which you definitely can, it's just going to be a prettier slice. Well, maybe, huh? So totally different. This is going to be much more tender, okay? So pay attention to the grain. Don't do it like I did it. Do it right. All right, that's all I'm going to cut because Jeff and I, that'll feed us for a couple days, actually. So I'm going to put this on the platter like I would serve it, which you can tell by the thumbnail picture that I've already made this, and I did a much better job. All right, so let's go ahead and just pick this meat right up here. I'm going to put it this way so that's how you should have, or I should have cut it anyway. So I'm going to put it like that and then get those slices on here. And then you just pour over the gravy. This is what makes it so festive and so beautiful. Got one more stem of rosemary in there. So I just take this and just pour it over. Let it drip down. And it's just gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. I love this meal. And there you go. You're ready to serve that up, and people can take a slice, put the rest of the gravy in a bowl, because trust me, it is so delicious. They're going to want it extra. And put some sprigs of rosemary around the sides to kind of decorate it. Add a few more of these bright, beautiful cranberries around the tray, or save some, if you don't want the gravy with the cranberries, you want to really get decorative, just save some. Don't put them in there and then just spread them around. But there you go. So this is definitely a holiday brisket, and it's so delicious. I hope you guys give it a try. All right, so speaking of giving it a try, let me do that. And I'm going to take this piece, which is going to be on the toughest piece of all of them, because it's right on the end. So it's going to be a good determination of how tender the rest is going to be. And I'm not going to eat that fat, although I will tell you it is delicious. It is delicious, delicious. Okay, so let's get some mushrooms and some cranberries and some gravy. This goes so perfectly with mashed potatoes, and I have the best mashed potato recipe, so I will link to that right up there for you guys. Oh my gosh, that and some string beans, perfect meal. All right, let's dig in. So let's see, the meat has to be the star, so I want it to really be tender, like don't even need a knife to cut it, and it is. That's perfect. Now let's get a nice bite with a mushroom, piece of garlic, and a cranberry, and the meat. All right, here we go. I really don't even know how to describe this to you, because it is like one of the best briskets and gravy, because the flavors are so balanced. Brisket can be a very rich, fatty meat, but because we've got some vinegar in the gravy, we've got the cranberries, so they've got that sour flavor. Then we got a hint of sweet with the brown sugar. It's simply perfect. The meat is so tender. I mean, so tender, I just can't even get over it. But not like mushy, which, sometimes meat can get kind of mushy and weird texture. This tastes like you smoked it, minus the smoke flavor, obviously, or that you did a low and slow cook in the oven. That's the texture of this. It's not rubbery. Oh, it's amazing. Simply amazing, and I hope you give it a try.